So my name's Kyle, I'm the CISO at Clear. I've been at Clear for about a year now. You might know us as the airport company, but we do a lot more now than just airport kiosks. It's pretty exciting. I don't think we're supposed to pitch, but we're hiring, so check out our careers page. That's my only pitch. But today I want to talk about a framework I call log, deploy, fail. And basically what I want to talk about is like a really general framework on how to make sure when you're rolling out security controls, you're really focused on making them user-friendly. And by following my log, deploy, fail guidelines, I really hope you leave here today with a structured approach to adding security into a technology or process while maximizing the support and benefit you give to your users. So I want to start out by saying security is friction. There's no way around it. Without security, you have speed, you have a car without brakes, a login form without a CAPTCHA. Friction is the enemy of a fast-moving company and the enemy of an already swamped engineer. Friction's friend is a no. You might not be able to remove all friction when you do security, but if you can get it close to zero, you make it really hard to say no. And that's what I want to talk about today. How do you make it hard to say no? I've been in the business of making it hard to say no for many years and hope that many of you will eventually be in it for a long time too. Cool. In log, deploy, fail, we want to remove the no's at each step of the rollout of a security control. We start with logging, which will give us the data we need to show that our friction will make something better. In deploy, we want to be unreasonably hospitable to our users and make them feel supported every step of the way. Finally, in fail, we want to make it easy to fix things for the users we've inevitably did not account for in our deploy. I'm going to walk us how to use each step to maximize the success of your control being deployed during each step of the framework. Finally, in a rare security meetup moment, I'm going to ask all of you to think through something you're working on today, how you want to use log, deploy, and fail, and share it with a neighbor to see what they're working on. I really like this quote. Usable security ultimately comes down to making people happy. And there's a quote, I thought it was by Maya Angelou. If you Google it, it's actually not, but I think we'll just say it is. It was written by some guy in the 70s. But I think it really holds true, especially with security. People will forget what you do. They'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that's what we're trying to do with this framework. As I go through the framework, I'm going to demonstrate how I used it for two large changes I've recently worked on and implemented. One is a technical control, and one is a company-wide process change. The first example I'm going to talk about is a new data encryption standard. This is kind of like just like a POC overview of what we did, but we support field-level encryption for our core data models, but managing keys is a manual process. There's no systematic way to rotate your encryption keys, and we don't support encryption of large blobs of data like an image. And so what we're trying to do in this example that we're going to walk through is we want to move to a security-owned encryption service that can manage keys for you and allow us to roll in new features over time without any engineering support. Basically add additioning data encryption features without having to ask engineers to update code or do anything on their end. The second example we're going to walk through is limiting access to managed endpoints only. And so this is more of kind of a people and process problem that we worked through recently. And so this company has grown significantly over the last year and has taken on sophisticated enterprise customers that demand a high level of security from our product. The startup days of develop anywhere, work from your phone are over. We're going to lock down our identity platform to enforce device trust and limit access to managed devices only. For lower risk applications, we're going to roll out an enterprise browser to the workforce. This is where we're going to go. This is where we're going to end up at the end of the talk. And as I go through each step, I'd like you to think about a change or control you're working on today. What will you do for each step to successfully roll it out? I'm going to ask you all at the end to brainstorm using this framework for something you're currently working on. I want to see if it actually works. So we're going to start at step one, which is log. with any change, if you don't measure the impact, did the change even happen? When it comes to your performance review, how are you convincing your manager you had impact? You need data. But what is data? Data is usually logs. As a security person, I don't often have the metrics or team at hand who can help me generate those metrics. What I usually have access to, though, is logs or the ability to generate logs. That's pretty easy to do. I want to use these logs to build a metric that I can then use to show my impacts. The better the metric, the bigger the delta, the easier I can manage up, down, or sideways for support during my deploy. The more positive the change, the harder it is for people to tell me no. So what do I log? With these logs that I'm talking about here, you can measure volume-based metrics. As you roll out your control, you can demonstrate how you are bringing something down to zero and confidently declare your new control successful. Volume metrics, however, are not always the easiest to use because a number in isolation is hard to understand. Is 25 of something bad? Is 250 of something bad? Does it happen over 500 events, 10,000 employees? It's hard to really understand the context. The ultimate metric for any business, assuming we all work in vaguely businessy-like places, is money, and time is money. If you can get a time or money-based metric, you now have the gold standard for measuring business impact. Here's how we can get to some measurements that are focused on time and money, right? So we have 4 services that are vulnerable, and we want to get vulnerabilities fixed. We know how many hours it might take to fix a vulnerability recently. And if you talk to someone on your people team, you probably know at least maybe how much an engineer makes in an hour. And so even for just fixing vulns, we can start to get a sense of how much money we're going to save the company. The second one here is how long does it take to decrypt data? If time is money, every second you save on an API request is saving the company money. And so if you're able to roll out a new data encryption service that actually makes it easier to encrypt or decrypt data, you're saving the company money. Or at least faster than the current way, you're saving the company money. I just want to take a quick aside, acknowledge the financial quantification of cyber risk here as a CISO, and that most controls do have a direct financial cost benefit associated with them using a lot of frameworks like FAIR, actuarial tables, historical loss and settlement data. Just talk to your cyber insurer. These methodologies, while useful at a high level, are not worth your time as a practitioner of actual security inside an enterprise. Just keep it simple. So we're going to start putting it into practice with log. And so for the first step on the new data encryption scheme, what do we want to measure? We're trying to measure the number of decryption actions using the new service. So this is a volume-based log, which is pretty good, but not money or time. And the second one, for when we're rolling out the personal device lockdown, our log data is the Okta access logs. That's what we're going to see. That's what we're going to use to see who's accessing what applications, who's getting blocked, who's using things on personal devices. And the main metric we're going to use for this is the number of apps and users blocked on personal devices. We're basically going to 0 on this one. For step 2, it's deploy. When I started to write this talk, the second step was delay. Before we make any control blocking, we need an intermediate step that either limits the ability to do something, notifies aggressively, or provides a degraded experience. These are all delayed before we get to a failure. I realize, though, the magic is in the deployment of these delay tactics. So while deploy is obvious, what needs to happen in any project, how you deploy is what we want to focus on in the talk. One of my favorite business books is Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. Will was one of the owners of 11 Madison Park, consistently rated one of the best restaurants in the world. In the book, Will talks about how to create unforgettable experiences. This is what we're striving for when we begin to roll out any control. As a security engineer, we are the hosts of a beautiful architecture of data and assets, and we want to make sure our guests have a safe and comfortable time. How are you going to make your guests feel as you deploy your control? This is kind of a weird jump from hospitality, but unless you're at a startup, security has been layered over time across your company. whether it's how people are onboarded, the earlier permission groups, and the version of your internal libraries a repo might be using. As time marches on, your control is going to affect different sets of users very differently because of these layers. I call these different groups of users buckets. Understanding your buckets and how they are different is critical for a successful deploy. You are going to need to be thoughtful and spend a little extra time on your deployment to account for the needs of each bucket, just like how each customer was uniquely special at a Levis and Madison Park. Ultimately, though, you're going to miss a bucket, but we're going to talk about that in the final section. In each of these examples, the control is the same, but the buckets you need to account for are different. Each bucket is the result of a different security solution and previous controls being layered on top of each other. In log, deploy, and fail, we are also trying to come out of the other side of our control with a flattened set of buckets. And so some of the different buckets I called out here, and we had this with the data encryption project. A bucket we didn't realize was read heavy versus write heavy services. They had really different needs on the performance and reliability of our data encryption service, and eventually needed different endpoints to account for that. And then for device trust rollout, we realized our executive team probably needed a little extra handholding to significantly change how they do work. They don't like when that happens. Cool. So now we have our buckets. We need some scaffolding around the migration. Not all controls have a code component to them. For these, your plan for each bucket is what's most important. The plan should include how you communicate the changes and what people need to do if something goes wrong. This establishes the correct level of service, which according to Will Guidara, should be unreasonable. For technical controls, ones that live in code somewhere, at a minimum, think about what library you can write that will extract the actual migration. In my data encryption example, we created a library that could be passed arbitrary text blobs and know if it's a new type of encryption scheme. And based on that, know it needs to go to a totally different place to get all the keys it needs to do the work. This requires extra code for a bit, but eventually you need to clean up the migration code. That happens after the third step when the migrations are complete. Finally, the ultimate is a migration service. As we worked on the new data encryption scheme, we realized how important this work was to our entire application. This means the level of service we needed to provide became even higher. We moved the library into a managed service that could do things like bulk migrate data if you called the encryption endpoints with multiple text blobs. For the last one on migration service, it does require a lot of extra time. And importantly, the skills on a team to manage a long-running service. Not all security teams have the operational maturity to do that. But if you do, this really is like the ultimate customer experience. So now that we have our actual migration scaffolding, how do we start moving people over to the new control? I like to do something I call net new first. You can flip a switch for everyone all at once, preferably not on a Friday, but I like to turn things on in phases. It takes a bit more time to roll out the new control this way, but I focus on net new things to start. So that means like rolling something out on new hires first and then progressively migrating to everyone else. Use the new hires to iron out any issues. Turn on the control for commits that are only adding new code. Don't fail a build that is updating existing code. If something is brand new, your friction really isn't friction because it's the only way it's been done. It's like gravity. It's just a part of the system. Now you know the problem your control is solving. Now you know the problem your control is solving is at least not getting worse while you work on solving the old existing population. So putting this into practice for our two examples here. For the data encryption scheme, some of our buckets were the different encryption keys in use, the different ways you store the blob in the database. And so what we did for the migration scaffolding was build that service. We started with the library and realized because of how important the service was, we needed to invest time in the team to be able to support a service. And for personal devices, some of the buckets we had were, we still needed a few apps that were supported on a personal mobile phone. The web Slack experience is really bad, for example. Executives needed personal support, and our contractors had a whole different onboarding process instead of hardware they used that needed its own bucket. And these are some of the examples of what we did for each of the buckets. So for contractors, we actually flew some of our IT team out to their onboarding sessions to help the migration for that one. Cool. So the third step is fail. Ultimately, for any security control, success is failure. Failure of a risky action taking place. Now that our migration is wrapping up, we're ready to turn on blocking, start failing, or just turn something off. This is great news, but the bad news is we're going to break something when we flip that switch. It always happens. So, how do you prepare for failure? How do you know what will break? You don't. What you can do, though, is get ahead of everything by asking some of these questions. How will you know if something's broken? You already have some logs from the first step. Figure out what logs you need to keep an eye on when you turn the control on. Have a plan to unblock people. Someone will get blocked that shouldn't. How quickly can you get them the access back to what they need? How quickly can you turn that service back on that never stopped receiving the requests you didn't know about? Finally, where are all the people I missed coming from? Did you miss a bucket? Was there a whole bucket missed in the deploy phase? Depending on the size of the bucket, you might actually need an entirely new fail process you didn't account for. Or at a minimum, you know about a bucket for future deploys you have to think about. That's a pretty common one. So now taking it into practice, the fail for the new data encryption scheme, we built out really robust development environment testing with extra verbose logging to really make sure as people rolled it out in development and we were about to cut over in production, we had really high confidence in what was going to happen, which services would be affected, which services weren't handling the new formats correctly, all of that. What did we miss? Yeah, there was a few services that just somehow you just don't know about in production that were using one of the keys you rotated. We did our best, but it happened. For that one, we actually had a really quick way to reprovision keys. I think that's what happened for that one. That's been a little bit though. And then for the personal device lockdown, the fail we tried to prevent here was rolling out an enterprise browser. And so basically for people that couldn't do work in places they wanted to, they did have an alternative. We rolled out an enterprise browser that we had a lot better control over than using Chrome on a personal device, something like that. What did we miss? There was a team that actually weren't contractors, but were never issued corporate laptops, which was really wild to know. And then also know we totally missed it on the IT side at a larger issue. That team now has corporate laptops. Cool. I don't know. I don't know how the crowd wants to do this, but I was gonna see if people want to like sit and brainstorm with themselves quietly for 3 minutes and think about something you're working on now and how you can put log deploy fail into practice. And so I do have a timer. I'm going to see if this works here. I know people don't like to be silent sometimes, but I know we're all practitioners. We're working on something. What are you working on right now? What do you need to log about it to know if what you're doing succeeds? What are the buckets? What are 2 buckets you need to do differently for? Do something differently for? What when you miss a bucket, how do you fix it? What's going to break? I'll give you 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I want you to talk to a neighbor and hear what they're working on. I know that's really scary. After the 3 minutes, you brainstorm for 3 minutes and then you talk to your neighbor. Yeah, you have to brainstorm right now. You're brainstorming. Yeah. Mm, mm. All right, we're going to say that was 3 minutes. What is your neighbor working on? And what are some of their buckets? All right, you have 1 more minute to chat. All right, everybody. Awesome. That was 3 minutes. I hope you all learned about a really cool project. I don't know if we have the AV set up right now to share some of the learnings, but I think we can use that after this talk. It's all good. I didn't think that would work, but that was really cool to see. Thanks everyone for chatting. But that's it. That's where we're at. I hope next time you're rolling something out today, tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's Friday, right? So Monday. Uh, think about it. What are your buckets? What's going to break? And good luck and enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody.